At a few minutes past 3 in the morning on the 4th of May, 2010, a 911 dispatcher in Oviedo, Florida, was trying to make sense of a woman who had just said she had shot someone. The dispatcher needed one fact above all others. Who? The woman's answer narrowed the whole world down to a single bedroom in a rented house.
Who did you shoot, young husband?
The man in the bedroom was Robert Cline. He was Anita Smithey's estranged husband, and he was dead from 2 gunshot wounds, one of them through the chest. Anita did not run. She did not deny it. When the first officer arrived, she was already outside, sitting on the front walkway crying, repeating a single thought.
When I arrived, Miss Smithey was already on the front walkway to the house. She was sitting down, she was crying. She kept saying that he shouldn't have been here, he shouldn't have been here.
From that first moment, the case carried a strange, unbearable doubleness. Anita Smithey never disputed that she had killed Robert Cline. What she disputed, what 11 years of courtrooms would never fully resolve, was why. By her account, she had shot a man who was raping her and who she believed was about to kill her. By the account of the police, the prosecutors, and Robert's family, she had shot a man who simply would not leave, and then she had gone to work building a story to cover it. There were only 2 people in that room. One of them could no longer speak. Everything that followed would be an argument over the silence the other one left behind. Before he was a body in a bedroom and the subject of a true crime broadcast, Robert Cline was a person, and the people who knew him are insistent about who that person was. He had served as a combat medic in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm with an airborne infantry unit, a man trained to keep other people alive under fire. He married a woman named Deborah, and together they had 2 children, Stephanie and Eric. His son would later sit with a 48 Hours correspondent, turning the pages of a photo album, narrating a father's whole life in a child's plain sentences.
Jury's indicated they've reached a verdict.
The day of the verdict, I was like, this is it. This is the day that my mom is finally free and liberated from this. She can just live happy and free.
In 2003, Deborah died of a heart attack, and Robert became a widower and a single father, raising 2 young children on his own. The accounts differ slightly on exactly when he met Anita Smithey. Some place it in 2004, others in 2005. But the shape of it is consistent. They met through work. Robert was in sales, Anita was a database programmer. Anita was herself a single mother of 2, going through a divorce from her first marriage. She turned to Robert for support, and that support became a romance. To Robert's daughter Stephanie, who had grown up without a mother, the arrival of Anita felt, at first, like a gift. On the 6th of May 2007, Robert Cline and Anita Smithey married and blended their 2 families under one roof. His 2 children and her 2 children. From the outside, in the early days, it had the look of a second chance, built carefully out of 2 earlier losses. What the marriage was actually like, behind the door, is one of the central contested questions of this case, and the 2 families answer it in opposite directions. Anita's son, Drew Smithey, described a marriage that started as a postcard and curdled over time. By his account, Robert grew distant, irritable, and verbally abusive, and the house filled with a tension a teenager could feel in his bones. He would say, plainly, what he believed his mother had done.
I believe that my mom did what she had to do to escape with her life.
Anita herself, in court and in her one television interview, painted Robert as a man who became controlling and consumed. She said he was addicted to marijuana, that he punched holes in the walls, that he became obsessed with sex, that he dictated details of her life down to the underwear she wore to work. She told a Stand Your Ground hearing that she had simply had enough, and that this was why she filed for divorce in 2010 and moved with her 2 children into a home in Oviedo. Robert's family rejects this portrait completely. To his daughter Stephanie, Anita was not a battered wife, but a performer, someone who had learned that being a victim was useful. Robert's sister Belinda, a sheriff's deputy, said she had watched Anita describe an earlier husband as abusive too, and never follow through on any of the steps a person in danger might take. In their telling, the abuse ran the other way. There were reports that Anita drank heavily and mistreated Robert's children, and that the household was poisoned, not by Robert, but around him. These 2 accounts cannot both be wholly true, and no documentary, no jury, and no appeals court has ever been able to merge them. What is established is narrower and sadder. The marriage was failing, the couple had separated, divorce was underway, and yet they had not actually stopped seeing each other. After the separation, Robert kept coming to the house in Oviedo. The pattern, as Anita described it, was specific. Monday nights were when her children were with their father, and Monday nights were when Robert would come over, often for sex, in spite of everything that had supposedly ended between them. She said she told him not to come. She said he came anyway. On the night of the 3rd of May, into the early morning of the 4th, Robert showed up shortly before midnight. By Anita's own account to detectives, what happened next began as something familiar. He brought a bottle of tequila. He set up her cable television. They took a shot, watched an episode of CSI, and started to kiss. She has said she went along with sex initially because she expected that afterward he would simply go home, that this was, in her words, what they did. And then the 2 stories, the one Anita tells and the one the state tells, split apart for good. In Anita's version, when it was over she got dressed and told Robert to leave, and he refused. He became enraged. He pulled a knife. He held it to her. He beat her, and he raped her, and at some point she became certain that he intended to kill her. Her best friend, called as a witness, described to Robert that Anita's family says they had always known.
He treated her like garbage, like a punching bag, with every intention of killing her. And that's when she shot him.
Anita framed it as a matter of survival, and pointed to the difference in their bodies as the difference between living and dying.
He came to my home. He had violent sex with me. I was scared. He is 6 foot tall and 225 pounds, and I weigh 125 pounds.
She has said she warned him. She has said she got a gun and told him to stop. And then, by her telling, as he leaned back against the weapon, it fired, and fired again. The prosecution looked at the same night and saw something colder. Their account did not include a rape at all. In their telling, the sex was consensual, part of a rough role-playing dynamic the couple had engaged in before. There was no intruder. There was a man who came over, as he often did, and who afterward would not go home when Anita wanted him gone. When the case reached closing arguments, the state laid that theory out in detail, even seizing on a small domestic act as proof of what kind of partner Robert had been that night.
During their second sexual encounter, Cline gets up to get lubricant, which the state called the actions of a considerate sex partner and not a rapist. Smithey waited for him to come back.
But while he's doing that, she's incrementally arming herself with a .38 caliber revolver.
In the state's theory, Anita Smithey shot Robert Cline not to escape death, but to end an argument. And then, faced with a dead man and a story that needed support, she set about manufacturing the evidence of an attack. The single most important piece of the state's case was not the gun. It was the cuts on Anita's own body. She said Robert had inflicted them. The prosecution said she had inflicted them on herself. The truth of those cuts became the hinge on which the entire case would swing, first one way, then the other, for more than a decade. When the case came to trial in November 2014, 4.5 years after the shooting, the medical evidence took center stage. The district's medical examiner, Dr. Friedrich Bulik, was direct about the cause of death. Robert had been shot twice, and it was the second shot, the one that severed his aorta, that killed him. He also told the jury that after the first shot, Robert would likely have been in too much pain to be making any aggressive movement toward Anita at all. Then he turned to Anita's injuries and used a clinical term that landed with enormous weight. He called them hesitation wounds. The cuts to her neck, face, and abdomen were shallow, he said. The kind of marks a person makes when the blade is in their own hand, because cutting yourself hurts, and the hand flinches and pulls back before it goes deep. In his opinion, there was no evidence that any other person had inflicted them. But the medical evidence was not all in one direction, and this is where the case earns its genuine difficulty. The defense called its own expert, Dr. William Anderson, who reached the opposite conclusion about the torso wounds, that they were not self-inflicted and were consistent with a sexual assault. And there was a second detail that complicates the tidy version of either side. The defense built its closing around it.
If this was consensual sex, that the population in this country would be zero, because no one would put her through that pain, that trauma.
There was also this. The sexual assault nurse who examined Anita that morning, a witness called by the prosecution, not the defense, testified that the injuries to Anita's groin were consistent with a sexual assault. Both experts acknowledged those same injuries could also be consistent with consensual sex. The physical evidence, in the end, did not deliver a verdict. It delivered a tie, which meant the case would be decided by something else. That something else was a recording, a police interview conducted in the hours after the shooting. After Anita called 911, she was taken to the hospital, treated for her bruising and her shallow wounds, and given a sexual assault examination. She had reportedly not slept in roughly 36 hours. From the hospital, she was taken to the Oviedo Police Department and placed in an interview room. Jurors would eventually watch a long recording of what happened there.
Jurors this afternoon listened to a lengthy video recording of an interview police did with Anita Smithey just 12 hours after she shot and killed her husband. The state maintains there are many inconsistencies in what Smithey told police, including telling them in one interview her husband had a knife and not even mentioning the knife in another interview.
At a certain point in that long night, Anita said the thing that would define the rest of her life. She told detectives that the wounds on her torso were not from Robert at all. She said she had inflicted them herself, after the shooting, because she was afraid that without them, no one would believe she had been attacked. On the day the recording was played, the prosecution pressed her, in her own recorded words, to admit it.
But you didn't stand yourself by the closet. You stand yourself near him. Is it fair to say that? There's no need to lie now.
I'm not lying. I don't remember where I stabbed myself. I know that I freaked out and I did it.
Anita's defense has always argued that this was not a confession at all, that it was a traumatized, exhausted, recently examined rape victim saying whatever might let her out of that room. Her attorney made the point that the interrogation was built out of pressure, not truth.
All her statements concerning the knife are replete with basically leading questions by law enforcement. I don't think there's one admission by Miss Smithey, or what could be considered an admission by Miss Smithey of stabbing herself.
And here the law made its first decisive move. At some point in that interview, Anita had told the detective she no longer wished to make any statements. She had invoked her right to remain silent. The detective kept going anyway. Because the interrogation improperly continued past that point, the trial judge suppressed her admission that she had cut herself. The jury that would decide her fate was not supposed to hear it at all. What happened next is the part of this story that lawyers still study, because it is the moment a defense trying to save a woman handed the prosecution the weapon that buried her. The suppressed statement was not gone forever. The judge had ruled it could come back in under one condition. If the defense itself did something to mislead the jury about Anita's wounds, the state would be allowed to use her own words to correct the record. It was a trapdoor, and the defense's entire strategy depended on keeping it shut. Then the defense played Anita's 911 call for the jury. In that call, Anita told the operator that Robert had stabbed her and that she had shot him in self-defense. It is an understandable thing to want a jury to hear. the raw, frightened voice of a woman moments after the event. But it asserted, in Anita's own voice, that Robert had inflicted her wounds. And that assertion was exactly the thing her suppressed confession contradicted. The prosecution moved at once to admit the statement they had lost, and the judge agreed. The suppressed sentence came roaring back into the trial. One of her own lawyers would later admit, under oath, that he had simply forgotten Anita told the 911 operator she'd been stabbed, and that, had they seen the risk, they would absolutely not have played the call. Anita Smithey did not take the stand. She thought about it and decided against it.
Well, that's right. Anita Smithey thought about it, but opted not to testify in her own murder trial, which will wrap up tomorrow.
Anita Jane Smithey, note the
In court today, 46-year-old Anita Smithey decided not to take the stand in her own defense.
The jury was left with two irreconcilable stories, a body of physical evidence that pointed both ways, and one recorded admission that pointed in only one direction. The jury did not deliberate for long. They had the case for roughly an hour and a half before the deliberations that would seal it, and in total it took them about 3 hours to decide.
State of Florida versus Anita Jane Smithey. Verdict. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder.
When the word guilty was read, Anita broke down, sobbing and collapsing, and her family's cries rose in the gallery behind her. Across the aisle, Robert Cline's family wept too, but for them it was relief at the end of a 4.5-year wait. The two families, who had once been one household, sat on opposite sides of a courtroom and grieved entirely different griefs at the same moment.
We further find that during the commission of the crime,
For Robert's children, the verdict was the thing they had wanted most, the right to stop having their father's name dragged through the mud. For Anita's son Drew, sitting feet away, the same verdict was the worst thing he had ever witnessed.
To have to witness such injustice.
Anything further from the state?
On the 2nd of February, 2015, the judge sentenced Anita Smithey to 40 years in prison. The defense had asked for the minimum, 25 years, and described a caring, loving woman. Her best friend had begged the judge to get her help. Robert's family had spoken too, his daughter calling her father a superhero. The judge gave Anita 40 years.
The defense asked the judge for the minimum sentence, which would have been 25 years, but the judge gave her 40.
She was in her mid-40s. The arithmetic was brutal and obvious. She would, in all likelihood, leave prison an old woman, if she left it alive at all. The cost of the trial had landed on the people around her too. Anita's father had travelled from Indiana and sat in court every single day. To pay for her defense, he had sold the family farm. He had spent a lifetime's inheritance on a defense that, through a single forgotten detail, had helped to convict his daughter. The crime had not just taken Robert Cline's life. It had reached forward and reshaped the lives of 4 children who had once shared a home. Robert's 2 were later raised by his sister, Belinda. For a while, that looked like the end of the story. But the case had always turned on one sentence: Anita's admission that she had cut herself, and the broadcast that examined it most closely did something unusual. It opened with the verdict, then spent the rest of its hour asking whether the jury had reached it for the right reasons. The correspondent who covered the trial laid out the defense's theory of the confession plainly.
She'd been up 36 hours. She's being aggressively interrogated. 11 different times she's pressed on this. She's being shouted at. No attorney present. Eventually she caved in. It happened in the Amanda Knox case. Same situation. It's not unusual. People will say what the cop wants them to say to get out of that room.
And you think that's why the jury convicted her?
He went further and put his finger on the exact contradiction that sits at the dead center of this case. The reason it has never fully resolved, no matter how many times it has been retold.
Claimed that she had self-inflicted this wound when the rape nurse who examined her said she was definitely raped. But that one statement really turned things around against her.
A confession that the wounds were faked, set against a nurse's finding that the assault was real. The jury chose the confession, but the question of whether they should have would not stay buried, because Anita's appellate lawyers were about to argue that the jury should never have heard that confession in the first place. The appeal was not that Anita was innocent. It was that her own defense had broken her trial. The claim was ineffective assistance of counsel, and it rested on that one decision to play the 911 call and let the suppressed confession back in. Without it, the jury had 2 stories and a tie. With it, the outcome was never in doubt. In December 2020, in a divided 2-1 decision, the 5th District Court of Appeal reversed the conviction. The majority found the 911 call had let in the statement most likely to determine her guilt. The dissent saw 4 years of otherwise excellent work and a single isolated misjudgment. The majority governed. The case was sent back for a second trial. A second trial would be weaker for the state, and Robert's family faced reliving it all before a new jury more than a decade on, so prosecutors chose certainty over risk. On the 18th of May, 2021, Anita Smithey pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 6.5 years of time served, plus 10 years of probation, but if she violates it, a suspended 25-year sentence can still close around her. She walked out a free woman. There is one strange footnote. Awaiting trial, Anita had befriended another Central Florida woman, Kimberly Boone, also accused of shooting her husband. Their jailhouse calls were later released by the court.
Of course, both women gambled on trials and lost, now spending more time behind bars than they would have if they had taken the offers from the state to admit their guilt.
For Anita, that gamble finally paid, but only after 6.5 years, and a reversal that almost did not happen. Strip away the appeals and the rulings, and what remains is smaller and harder. A man came to a house he'd been asked not to come to. A woman shot him twice. He died. She lived. They are the only 2 who ever knew what passed between them in that room. Everyone else has spent a decade reading the truth off evidence that could mean 2 opposite things. Were those cuts the marks of a rapist, or the careful work of a woman building an alibi? The evidence answered, maybe either. Robert Cline's children are left holding the unanswerable part. His son grew up with a handful of memories and a photo album, narrating his father's life to a stranger with a camera, because that was what he had left.
In some ways, when you look at this photo of your mom and dad and you guys, you as a little infant, it almost looks perfect, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If only you could have kept that.
Yep.
He was talking about a different photograph, but the line reaches past its own moment. So much of this case is the gap between how a life looks in a picture and how it actually went. Robert Cline survived a war as a man whose job was saving lives. He did not survive a Monday night. Anita Smithey served 6.5 years and walked out under a sentence that can still close around her. And 4 children, who once shared a home, now carry the same loss told 2 different ways. The only thing the 2 families will ever truly share.